Some people take educational planning as part of governance and others take governance as part of educational planning. In both ways, it is important to know what educational planning is about. Let's see how can we define educational planning. Planning is the intellectual anticipation of possible future situations, the selection of desirable objectives, and the determination of relevant actions that need to be taken in order to reach those objectives at a reasonable cost. So there are three key important aspects in educational planning. One, it is intellectual anticipation, means we need to see what kind of future education do we want to have. The second is what key actions can be taken to reach to that goal. Because when we say intellectual anticipation, means we set some kind of objectives, we set some kind of targets. And how are we going to meet those targets? Broader actions need to be identified in educational plans. And the most important thing is availability of resources. What kind of resources can be used effectively? Because we don't want to make educational plans which have very high cost but very little outcome. So we want to make efficient educational plans so that they are cost effective. So planning has some benefits for policymakers. So these benefits are that planning helps policymakers to implement education reform and system transformation. Planning helps educational planners to realize equal opportunities for children and youth and provide equality education for all. So educational planning is directly beneficial for policymakers. If there is no educational plan, educational policy cannot be made. So there are some planning considerations. These considerations are real conditions including dimensions of current status of education and socio-cultural context, economic conditions of the country, future aspirations. A country with low GDP cannot make huge budget plans for education. So we need to see what are the economic conditions of the country, and the other thing is but it is important that what kind of things do we want for our children in future. That is an important consideration. But analysis of current situation is probably the most important thing. That is, what is current status of education in our country. So current context of education includes realization of literacy rate, modes of education, qualification of teachers, teachers' working conditions, teachers' preparation, school statistics, teacher-student ratio, resources. Because if we don't know what is current literacy rate in our country, how can we identify, how can we set a target for future? Similarly, if we don't know current qualification of teachers, we will not be able to set a target for the future. Similarly, school statistics are important considerations. We need to know how many children do we have in our country and how many children are out of school, how many schools exist, what is the school attendance rate, what is the dropout rate of the students, what is teacher-student ratio. Do we have enough teachers in our schools, or we need to have more teachers? So these are important considerations. Some more considerations are what is current spending on education? What are the outcomes of spending? Are we spending enough? If we are spending enough, what are the outcomes? Are we spending less? If less, then what are the outcomes of less spending on education? What are the outcomes for the state and what are the outcomes for the individuals? Both need to be considered. What are the success stories? This is a very important consideration for educational planners. Many times, educational plans are made on some speculations, on thoughts, or there are success stories which are considered, but they do not belong to indigenous contexts. So it is important that we select those stories, those success stories which are from our context. अगर हम अपने मुल्क के अंदर developed countries की story, success stories बताएंगे, maybe they are very good and they can be replicated, लेकिन उसमें problem ये ज़रूर हो सकता है कि बहुत सारे लोग ये कह सकते हैं कि नहीं जी हमारे पास तो ये resources नहीं है. So when we talk about success stories need to be indigenized. And there are two more considerations about they are distance education and equality and equity. We need to know what kind of distance education is being provided at the moment and what can we plan for the future. और इसी तरीके से equity और equality, these are two very important concepts. We need to know what access opportunities do our children have. Is there equality among the people or not? Do children have equal opportunities or not? So issue of access and equality, they are two important issues. They need to be considered by the educational planners. So educational planning is an important concept. Whenever we are going to understand educational governance, educational planning needs to be understood, and these are the planning considerations which need to be taken in account.